Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture. Today we're looking at a cereal. I haven't done a cereal review in a while. Of course, I mean cereal is in motion picture cereal, not breakfast cereal. I haven't done one of those reviews at all. Maybe I should. But what we're going to look at today is The Mysterious Dr. Satan from Republic Pictures, 15 chapters. Now, it's not a bad cereal. It's pretty good. But one of the more interesting aspects of it is that it began as a script for a Superman serial. This would have been, in 1940, Superman's first appearance in live action. So, 2 years after the creation of the character and his introduction in the comic books. As it is, that would have to wait for quite a few years when Kirk Allyn, in the late 40s, finally actually took on the role. We'd actually end up getting the Captain Marvel serial before we ever saw Superman in live action. Well, let's jump in here with Chapter 1, Return of the Copperhead. Yes, the Copperhead is the hero they used to replace Superman in the script. And you'll see some things as we go through that clue you in to this being originally written for Superman. Okay, so let's take a look. Oh, and by the way, this is the first chapter of 15. I'm not going to worry about spoiler alerts or anything like that. It ain't giving the whole story away. And it's a serial, which means you kind of know who's gonna probably win at the end, as in good guys versus bad guys. So let's go here. So, of course, we get the roll call right off the bat with Edward Cianelli as Old Doc Satan. So not too mysterious to the audience, and that's not just kind of a joke here. Sometimes the villains in serials would be hooded figures, very often one of the other side characters, so you didn't know who the bad guy really was. Sometimes you got to know who they were right off the bat, and if that's the case, they needed to do a really good job as the villain. And he does a really good job as the villain. He's one of the highlights, in my opinion, of the serial. Robert Wilcox is playing Bob Wayne, and, well, you'll see, Wilcox, he mostly did B pictures, and then after serving in World War II, did stage work, but he did not go back to Hollywood. So William Neill plays Speed Martin. He is a reporter in this. Now, the actor is maybe best known for playing Alfalfa's dad in some Our Gang comedies, but other than that, B-movies, that kind of fare. C. Montague Shaw, one of the great names in motion pictures, as Scott, it just says here, but he's Professor Scott, so his inventions are going to be some of the key MacGuffins in this serial. And if you've watched enough serials, you know how this kind of thing often goes. Now, Ella Neill plays Lois Scott. So let's throw this out here right now. This, of course, would have been Lois Lane in a Superman serial. They changed the last name. They kept her first name Lois. Now, would they have made Lois's father a professor? They might have. The serials didn't always stick super close to the comic books. Doesn't that sound familiar? That's kind of how they do it nowadays. Also, when we got a live-action Superman in 1948, Lois was played by Noel Neill. Here, could have been Lois, played by Ella Neill. Telling you what, some kind of a conspiracy going on here. Dorothy Herbert plays Alice Brent, Professor Scott's secretary. She was, I believe, a stunt woman, and is actually pretty legitimately cool in this series. You're going to see in this particular chapter her do some stunt work that's pretty groovy. Directed by William Whitney and John English, they did many B-movies, many serials. So, first chapter, like I said, we're not going to worry about spoilers here because, you know, it's just the first chapter and it's a serial made for kids, so it's not that surprising. But anyways, Picture begins outside the state building. So that would be like a government building. A guard's on patrol, and a seedy-looking guy is watching him. A cab pulls up. A man gets out, and Mr. Seedy shoots him. So, hey, kids' entertainment, and we already have somebody shot, because that's how they rolled back in the 1940s. But it is also a solid opening for an adventure serial. At this point, Bob Wayne pulls up and gets the lowdown from a cop on the shooting. They don't know who the victim was. He must have been headed in to see the governor, because apparently there's nobody else in the state government building other than the governor that somebody might want to see. So Bob heads in to see the governor and discovers the dead man was Arthur Chambers, the great criminologist. Only he and the governor knew about their meeting. But Dr. Satan knew, and Dr. Satan had him killed. The governor is worried that he's next. So he's sent for Bob to tell him a few things. In particular, he tells him about an Arizona raider. So we're talking sort of the Old West, known as the Copperhead. He always wore a copper mask, and he left a copper serpent as a sign of his killings. And the Copperhead was Bob's father, the governor's old friend. When he and Bob's mother passed, the governor took Bob in. Now, in truth, though, Bob's father was not really a criminal. He righted wrongs that needed righting. So, kind of like the Green Hornet, kind of like Lone Ranger, kind of like Batman. You get the idea. They think he's a bad guy. He's really a good guy. Why, if the Copperhead was alive today, he'd stop this Dr. Satan before he could strike another blow. That gives Bob an idea. So while Bob leaves, and while he's outside, the governor gets an additional visitor while he's ordering up the National Guard to oppose Dr. Satan. It's the guy who shot the criminologist. And after a little theatrical flourish of a self-destructing note, he shoots the governor. That's when Bob walks in, vaults across the desk at the guy. Now, this is the bread and butter of old serials, especially if you're watching them as an adult, because the plots are usually not like real complicated. You know, there's not a lot of character development. You need absolutely bonkers fistfights, and the mysterious Dr. Satan does not disappoint. There's some real good ones. They're knocking each other all over the office, jumping, etc. You get the idea. Bob finally gets a hold of the killer and threatens to throw him off the balcony to his death if he doesn't talk. Now that's what I'm talking about. That is first-rate crime fighting. Well, the guy sings like a canary. Dr. Satan forced him to commit the murders under threat of death. The cops are brought in, then the reporters show up, Speed Martin, and the paper's top sob sister, Lois Scott. Now, I've just recently gone through the first year of Superman comics to do a video that'll show up in about a month or so. And Lois Lane at one point is described as a sob sister. Okay. And I didn't know what that was. Looked it up. A sob sister is the woman who had to do like the Lonely Hearts column. So all the little stories or all the little letters about, oh, my boyfriend left me and I don't know what to do. And obviously Lois Lane did not want to be the sob sister. She wanted to do serious news. Perhaps that's the same with Lois Scott. Now, the killer doesn't know who Dr. Satan is. He gets his orders through this control disc that is strapped to his chest, which is pretty cool, to be honest. So Dr. Satan straps these on to his henchmen to force them, even against their will, to do what he wants. Now we fade to Dr. Satan, and we see his robot back there. Yes, that is what that is. It is, in fact, a robot. He is informed that the police have captured Corbet. That's the name of his man, the seedy guy killing everybody. He uses a machine to home in on the scene where Corbet is telling them that Dr. Satan wants an invention of Professor Thomas Scott, Lois's dad. They then hear Dr. Satan over the device on Corbet's chest. He boasts that they cannot stop him, and then scrap one henchman. This is pretty good villainy, excellent mad scientisting, And of course, Cianelli plays it very well. Very sinister. The remote control murder being completed, Dr. Satan decides that he must steal Professor Scott's remote control cell. It is the only component he needs to complete his robot. So he will strike Scott while he's traveling on the train, and meanwhile, the cops are going to put a detective on the train to protect Scott. But Bob knows that ain't good enough. So he and Speed are going to run over there in Speed's car so they can get there first. Come on. If you're going to be the hero of a serial, you got to put in the extra work. So Scott and the detective are in their cabin. Dr. Satan and his thug are in theirs, which I think might even be next door, and they're preparing to strike. And Bob and Speed are rushing to intercept. Dr. Satan is going to knock Scott out using ether or something like it, which actually, in fact, works. And we get some nice action scenes here of them, of Bob and Speed racing this train to a crossing in their car. And then Bob jumps onto the train from the car and goes searching for the professor's cabin. He arrives when Dr. Satan and his henchmen are still there. He knocks on the door. They decide we'll hide the unconscious professor and the detective in the bathroom. And they're going to pose as the professor and the detective. So Bob's allowed in. He explains he wants to be there when Dr. Satan shows up. Wish granted, they pull guns on him. But the two don't have normal guns. They have guns that fire poisoned needles. If you're going to be a mad scientist, do it all the way. So Bob is shot. That's the end of the story. No. In fact, it's not, because in a great stroke of luck, the needle hits the Copperhead mask that the governor had given him that he had in his coat. So now you can well imagine, though, this could have also worked in a Superman serial. Clark Kent goes in, makes the explanation. They shoot him. He pretends to fall. But of course, he's really Superman, so it doesn't penetrate his skin. So you can see definitely some places where this would have worked as a Superman serial. Well, while he's playing dead, Bob overhears Dr. Satan ordering his thug to get the professor's plans from the train's safe. Bob dons the mask and then crawls out the window and onto the top of the train, because again, running around on the tops of the trains, very, very cool in old movies. He swings into action now as the henchman starts to make his way away. Make his way away? Why not? With the plans. And we get another fight that ends with Copperhead and the thug falling out of the train. They roll down this hill and get right back to fighting, but Bob knocks the guy out and gets away with the plan. So, first round goes to the Copperhead. Dr. Satan reacts pretty calmly to discovering his plan has failed, and he's intrigued by the Copperhead snake emblem that is left behind. But he's not licked yet. They're testing the remote control device on a yacht later that day, and that's where the unit will be stolen. Now we visit the professor's house at Loman Park, and we meet his secretary, Alice. She delivers his briefcase that was just delivered by a message boy. So basically, Bob had some message boy deliver the suitcase with the plans, so nobody would know that he was involved. Smart guy. Along with a note from the Copperhead. Dear sir, herewith are the plans to your remote control cell. Signed, the Copperhead. Scott wishes he could meet the Copperhead, and Bob smirkingly responds that maybe someday you will, and dang if it doesn't look like Alice already has figured out that he was the Copperhead. I told you, Alice is a smart cookie. So then we see Scott putting his plans in the safe. Bob's worried that, well, it's not safe enough. No. Scott informs him, I have a special trap in there that can send enough electricity through a person to knock them unconscious, if they don't do things just right. Well, that night, Professor Scott arrives home and discovers his control panel is missing. Looks like Dr. Satan made a house call. He has the control panel and he wants the complete set of plans for his remote control cell. And maybe a beverage. He's been waiting forever for the professor to finally get home. And that's, of course, a joke. But yeah, you kind of go, dude, was he just standing behind that curtain for like hours? What if the professor was like, way late? He decided to stop and eat on the way home. Well, at any rate, we're not going to worry too much about reality here because this is an old movie serial. But the professor refuses. So Dr. Satan explains that he has rigged the yacht they're testing tonight with explosives. The ship Lois is on. When the boat reaches 25 knots, it will explode. So it's like reverse of that movie Speed. Dr. Satan has Alice, the professor's secretary, tied up in the barn. But she manages to get her feet loose and escape. And this is where you see she was almost certainly a stunt woman because the typical actress would not be doing any of this stuff. So she gets on this horse with her hand still tied behind her back, gets through the door, and, follows it up then by doing this jump, while her hands are tied. If horses could do donuts on a front lawn, she probably would have done that as well. Alice is a true badass, probably the most badass character in the serial, if we're completely honest. Well, the clock is ticking. Professor Scott finally gives in and decides to surrender the plans. While this is happening, Bob hooks up with Alice, no word on where Ted and Carol are, on the road, and finds out there's trouble afoot. Yes, I made a reference to that movie. I try to work one of those in anytime I get an opportunity. So he also gets an idea for something he might want to try out later with Lois. Anyways. Well, just as Dr. Satan gets his hands on the plans, the Copperhead shows up. And by the way, I dig the fact that Dr. Satan does some of his own dirty work, because a lot of times in these serials, the bad guy is sort of in his little hood or whatever, and he just sort of sits back and he orders thugs out and they fail him and, you're all idiots, Like Skeletor, Dr. Satan actually gets out there and screws things up on his own once in a while. Well, Copperhead throws the plans back into the safe, the electrified safe. You'll remember Dr. Satan brings up the whole exploding ship thing, and Copperhead reminds him that he's now a prisoner. And if the boat explodes, he'll be tried for murder. Perhaps he might want to change his plans. Copperhead says that if Dr. Satan calls off the explosion, he'll give him a 15 minutes head start to get out of there. I don't know if that's the greatest idea in the world, but Dr. Satan agrees and calls his men to give the order. But then he pulls the lamp cord out of the socket with his feet. The lights go out. Copperhead takes a shot and misses. Dr. Satan runs over to the safe, where he is shocked when he reaches in for the plans. I like that Dr. Satan is a fallible fiend. He doesn't always get away with everything, but he still bounces back. So, it's kind of the same with Copperhead. He's not going to win every single encounter, so it's going to be a good back and forth. And again, Eduardo Cianelli's performance makes it really fun. He's really good in this. Well, the plans burn in the process, so they're not going to be stolen now. But Dr. Satan's going to be unconscious for several hours, which means there's nothing to stop the boat from being destroyed. Nothing but the Copperhead. With 5 minutes left in the chapter, Scott tries to contact the boat via radio, but the bad guys have disabled it and they have control of the boat. They're watching it on a view screen. And you forget, though, this comes from a time when watching something like that on a view screen would have been pretty damn high tech. We take that kind of thing for granted. But that's good super science back in 1940. So Dr. Satan, like I said, has disabled the radio. So Copperhead's going to have to rush down there and save everybody himself. The boat is getting faster. Lois is trying to contact her dad via the radio, obviously failing. And Copperhead has the pedal to the metal. And I like this. This we're going to see a few times as we see the boat getting faster. Remember, they told us at 25 knots, it explodes. Well, Copperhead finally arrives at the marina. And if he was Superman, he could fly out to the yacht, but he didn't. So he roars out there in a speedboat, all while the yacht is getting closer and closer to 25 knots. He's seriously running out of time. But Copperhead finally arrives alongside, climbs up there. He sends the crew rushing for the speedboat and then goes below to grab Lois. But just as they're about to jump off the yacht, it explodes. And that's how we end chapter 1 of The Mysterious Dr. Satan. It is a fun serial. A lot of it does have to do with, you got some machination of Dr. Satan. The Copperhead gets involved. They tangle. There's a setback. We go to the next stage. But we do get a really awesome fight with a robot. That would have been really, really cool if it had been Superman fighting this robot, but still, Copperhead's not quite up to taking it out, but it provides good danger. So a fun serial, and it's fun also to watch it and just think about how it really would have worked with Superman, and I frankly do think that would have worked pretty good. So you might want to give The Mysterious Dr. Satan a try. 15 chapters. They're fun. Again, don't expect complex plots, a lot of character development. These are pure action movies. They were primarily aimed at kids, but that doesn't mean they're not fun for adults. If you've seen The Mysterious Dr. Satan, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think about it. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Watch The Mysterious Dr. Satan. And I'll see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.